Hello and welcome to Chapter 36, Operations for the EMT. So we're going to talk about preparing for the ambulance call, receiving and responding to a call, transferring the patient to the ambulance, and transporting the patient to the hospital. Transferring the patient to the ED staff, terminating the call, and air rescue. So let's talk about preparing for the call. There are 4 types of ambulances. This is a Type 1. It has the box. This is a Type 2, or a vanbulance, what I call it. There's not a whole lot of room in these. I would prefer not to work out of these things. I have before, and they're just not fun. This is a Type 3. This is the typical type of ambulance that you'll see out there. And this is what most services have. This is a medium duty type ambulance, typically on a Freightliner chassis. It's very big and has lots and lots of room and storage in it. So let's talk about some ambulance supplies and equipment. An ambulance without proper equipment may have its agency cited and fined a considerable amount of money by a state EMS regulatory agency. Each state basically says this is the minimum supplies and equipment that you have to have on an ambulance. Some things are outdated, whereas here recently, quite recently, even though they've been out of service for years, you had to have mask pants on your ambulance. It's one of those things that we haven't used in years, but they just now are getting them off of the ambulances. And then we need to learn where each item is and what it's used for, and when it should be used. Even at your level and you're going to work on an ALS ambulance, you need to know what the equipment is to be able to get it, know where it's at, and when it's going to be used, so that way you can help fully on that call. Okay, so check the interior surfaces and upholstery. So ensuring that the ambulance is ready for service, we want to make sure that all of our equipment and everything that we have in that ambulance is ready at the beginning of every shift. So there's a truck checklist that we go into, and we make sure that we go down that list and make sure that all of it is in working order, so that way we're prepared. Okay, so check the ambulance body, wheels, tires, and windshield wipers as well. That goes into making sure that the ambulance is working properly. Okay. So ambulance inspection with the engine off. We want to inspect the body of the vehicle, report any damage that may be evident, indicate past damage that has not been repaired, inspect the wheels and tires, check for damage, worn wheel rims and tire sidewalls, check the tread depth, and use a pressure gauge. Okay, inspect the windows and mirrors, look for broken glass or loose or missing parts, see that the mirrors are clean and properly adjusted for maximum visibility, and then check operation of every door and all latches and locks. Check fluid levels, check the battery, interior surfaces, okay, for cleanliness and for damage, okay. So check under the hood, check the dash. This is for the engine on ambulance inspection. Check the dash mounted indicators to see if the lights remain on to indicate a possible problem. Check the dash mounted gauges for proper operation. To press the brake pedal, note the pedal travel, how hard or easy is it to press, and then check the air pressure as needed. Test the parking brake, move the transmission level to a drive position, replace the level to the park position as soon as you're sure that the parking brake is holding, and then turn the steering wheel from side to side. Check the operation of the windshield wipers and washers. The glass should be wiped clean each time the blades are moved. Turn on the vehicle's warning lights. Have your partner walk around the ambulance and check each flashing light and revolving light for operation, and turn off the warning lights. Turn on the other vehicle lights. Have your partner walk around again, checking for headlights, signals, four-way flashers, brake lights, side and rear scene lights, and box marker lights. Check the operation of the heating and air conditioning equipment in both the driver's compartment and the patient compartment. Check the onboard suction. Operate the communications equipment. Test portable and fixed radios and any radio telephone communications. And if your unit is equipped with a backup camera, make sure that the camera is clean and not damaged. So, using your checklist, conduct a detailed inspection and inventory of the equipment and supplies. Check all items for completeness, condition, and operation. Check your treatment supplies, interior equipment, and exterior equipment. Check the pressure of the oxygen cylinders, inflate air splints if you have them, and examine them for leaks. Test oxygen and ventilation equipment for proper operation. Examine rescue tools for rust and dirt. Operate battery-powered devices to ensure that the batteries have a proper charge. Some equipment, such as the AED, may require additional testing. See that an item-by-item inspection of everything carried on the ambulance is done, with findings recorded on the inspection report. Complete the inspection report, correct any deficiencies if you can, replace any missing equipment, make your supervisor aware of any deficiencies that cannot be immediately corrected, and finally clean the unit for infection control and appearance. Use only approved cleaning and disinfecting materials. Okay, so let's think about this. As I walk around the ambulance, the engine on and engine off check, what information do I get from what I hear, see, and smell? So it's kind of like your own vehicle, okay? So, you know, we don't necessarily do a check on our own vehicle before we get in it, but we do from time to time check our oil. We notice things that may be wrong. You know, if there's a clicking, clanging, you know, whatever sounds that you hear, okay? And then if you smell oil, obviously that's probably a bad thing. Okay, receiving and responding to a call. So the role of the emergency medical dispatcher. So they ask questions of the caller and assign a priority to the call. Provide pre-arrival medical instructions to callers and information to crews, such as CPR instructions, stopping the bleeding instructions, instructions to put their animals away, turn on a light out front, you know, various things like that. They dispatch and coordinate EMS resources to make sure that those EMS resources are used in the best available manner. Okay, they coordinate with other public agency, safety agencies. So, you know, they coordinate with PD, they coordinate with fire department, and anything else that may be needed. So some questions that they ask: what is the exact location of the patient? What is your callback number? What's the problem? How old is the patient? What's the patient's sex? Is the patient conscious? And is the patient breathing? So operating the ambulance, being a safe ambulance operator includes being physically and mentally fit. You have to be able to perform under stress, have a positive attitude about your ability as a driver, but not be an overly confident risk taker. Be tolerant of other drivers, and never drive while under the influence of any substance. Never drive while taking prescription medications. Never drive with a restricted license, and always wear your glasses or contact lenses if required. Evaluate your ability to drive based on personal stress, illness, and fatigue. So, understanding the law, an ambulance operator must have a valid driver's license and may be required to complete a training program. Most services will have you complete a driver's course, like a emergency vehicle operations course of some kind. And then privileges granted under the law to the operators of ambulances apply when the vehicle is responding to an emergency and not applicable if not on a call, such as driving with licensed sirens. Okay. So even though certain privileges are granted during an emergency, the exemptions granted do not provide immunity to the driver. You still need to follow the rules of the road, even though there's the laws that say, you know, pull over, blah blah blah. You're asking for permission to the other drivers on the road for them to get over. It's not a guarantee. Okay, so privileges granted during emergency situations apply only if the operator uses warning devices in the manner prescribed by law. So most statutes allow parking wherever necessary as long as life and property are not endangered. Proceeding past stop signs and signals, exceeding the posted speed limit as long as life and property are not endangered. Passing other vehicles in a no passing zone after properly signaling and taking precautions. Disregard for regulations that govern direction of travel and turning in specific directions with proper caution and signals. Laws interrupted by the court based on using due regard for safety of others, and laws interpreted by the court based on using due regard for safety of others, and whether to the best of your knowledge the situation was a true emergency. Using the warning lights. So the siren, never use indiscriminately. The horn, visual warning devices, day or night. The vehicle should be easily seen from 360 degrees in the emergency response mode. Speed and safety. Excessive speed increases the probability of a collision. Speed increases stopping distance, reducing the chance of avoiding a hazardous situation. When we go, when you get to a certain point, you're faster than what your actual sirens are going. So at that point, they're not going to hear your sirens when you come up on them. They're going to hear your sirens a few seconds behind when you actually come up on them. So escorted or multiple vehicle responses, I'm not a big fan of it. It's just not a great deal. So if at all possible, try not to follow your escort vehicle too closely, and make sure that you have enough lead time to stop. When you do an escort, I don't like escorts, especially. I don't want to do them. I would prefer that nobody does them, but they do happen. And then multi-vehicle responses. It happens sometimes when you have multiple agencies or multiple ambulances even going to the same call. But just use some common sense and be smart about it. So factors that can affect our response: the day of the week, the time of the day. So like, you know, if we're going at rush hour traffic on a Thursday morning, that can affect our response. Weather, road maintenance and construction, railroads, bridges and tunnels, schools and school buses. All of these things can affect our response times. So navigating to the scene. GPS is often installed into an ambulance on the CAD, the computer aided dispatch. There's no substitute for an intimate knowledge of the response area. So get to know your response area and know when things are there. And then obtain detailed maps of your service area. Response safety summary. So minimize lights and sirens, hot responses. Driving with lights and sirens involves risk. Wear your seatbelts, know where you're going before you respond, and use your GPS, but don't let it be a distraction, and be familiar with your response area. Come to a complete stop at intersections. Don't be a distracted driver. Have a crew leader operate the radio, siren, GPS, computer, and other devices, and pay complete attention to safe driving. Keep unnecessary units and people off the highway. Avoid crossovers unless a turn can be completed without obstructing traffic. If yours is the first unit on scene, park the apparatus upstream from the incident. Wear your PPE. Place cones, flares, and reduce emergency lighting. Unit placement is important. Backing up. Avoid backing up if possible, especially during an emergency. Okay, so let's talk about transferring the patient to the ambulance. We want to make sure that we select the proper patient carrying device. So like a sled, a backboard, a stair chair, various other things that you need to carry that patient. Package the patient for transfer. So we want to make sure that we're packaging them appropriately on whatever device that we're using. Move the patient to the ambulance appropriately for the device, and then load the patient into the ambulance. Okay. So this patient is packaged for wet and cold conditions. Readying the patient to be moved and combining patient and patient carrying device as a unit, ready for transfer. Sick or injured patient must be packaged so the condition is not aggravated. So like, that patient back there on that last slide, she had a blanket and was wrapped in it. So we just want to make sure that we're not going to make the patient worse. Okay. So before placing the patient on the carrying device, complete the necessary care for wounds or other injuries, stabilize any kind of impaled object, check the dressings and splints, cover the patient, and secure to a patient carrying device. So protecting the patient, they must be secured to the device, minimum of 3 straps to secure the chest, waist, and lower extremities, and use a shoulder harness if available. So protecting the EMT, we're at greater risk in the patient compartment. Make sure all equipment is secured. Remain seated. Wear seatbelt and harness if possible. Avoid unnecessary movement during response and transport. So let's talk about transporting the patient to the hospital. So when we're transporting, we want to continue our assessment. We want to secure the stretcher, position and secure the patient, adjust the security straps, and prepare for any kind of respiratory or cardiac complications if necessary. Loosen any kind of constriction clothing, load relative or family who must accompany the patient. If you're going to take somebody, I typically put them in the front of the truck, in the driver's compartment versus the patient compartment. Load any personal effects, talk to your patient, and avoid letting patients sit on the bench or airway seat. En route to the hospital, we want to notify the hospital, continue to provide emergency care as required, use safe practices during transport, so seat belts, harnesses, whatever is required, compile additional patient information, continue assessment and monitor the vital signs, and notify the receiving hospital. Most places here, I mean, there's in each region of the country, there is a different way to notify the receiving facility that you're coming. So as a pediatric note, the entire scene may create a terrifying experience for a child. Toys such as a teddy can do much to calm a frightened child. The presence of a female EMT or police officer may even be helpful. And small children do not, as a rule, carry identification. So transferring to the ED staff. So if a routine admission situation or when an illness or injury is not life-threatening, check first to see what is to be done with the patient. Assist the ED staff as required and provide a verbal report. Each hospital, each ambulance service has different policies and different procedures, and some unwritten procedures and policies that we follow to transfer that patient. So as soon as you're free from patient care activities, prepare your pre-hospital care report, transfer the patient's personal effects, and obtain your release from the hospital. Typically a signature from the nurse saying that, yeah, we transferred him, we gave him a report, and everything was hunky-dory when it happened. Okay, so terminating the call. So at the hospital, we want to quickly clean the patient compartment, taking appropriate standard precautions. Prepare respiratory equipment for service if we used any. Replace any expendable items. Exchange equipment according to your local policy. We typically don't exchange equipment with the hospital. We get all of our stuff from our stock. There are some services out there that do, but we don't. So, and then we want to make up the ambulance cot. Okay. I would not suggest getting on your hands and knees. Most places will have, even at the hospital, they'll have some type of decontamination room type deal where they have a mop and a bucket and a broom that you can sweep out your ambulance and mop and clean everything with. So radio your dispatcher, air the ambulance if necessary. So just, there are stinky patients out there, so you want to make sure that you air it out, and then refuel your ambulance. Okay. Place badly contaminated linens in the biohazard container and non-contaminated linens in a regular hamper. As necessary, clean any equipment that touch the patient. Clean and disinfect used non-disposable respiratory assisting and inhalation and therapy equipment. So any kind of airway equipment, like if you sometimes some services will have non-disposable laryngoscopes and various things to help with intubation. So those things are not, they have to be cleaned. So, yeah. Clean and sanitize the patient compartment. Prepare yourself for service. Replace any expendable items. Replace or refill oxygen cylinders, and replace the patient care equipment. When you get into a service, they're going to tell you all of this and what schedule or based on what procedure you do all of this stuff. So carry out post-operation vehicle maintenance procedures as required, clean the vehicle, and complete your paperwork. Okay. Air rescue. So when to call for air rescue. Operational reasons, to speed the transport to a distant trauma center, when extrication of high priority patient is prolonged, and air rescue can speed their transport, when patient must be rescued from a remote location. Okay, so patients are sometimes transported by air rescue helicopter. So here's some clinical reasons that we transport by an air ambulance or helicopter. The patient's in shock. Their GCS is less than 10. They have a head injury with altered mental status. They have chest trauma and respiratory distress, penetrating injuries to the body cavity, amputation proximal to the hand or foot, extensive burns, serious mechanism of injuries. Patient is post-cardiac arrest with a pulse. So how to call for an air ambulance? Now, this is so different based on various things and regions and policies and everything like that. So for our area, we call, we just get on our radio and have dispatch call for a helicopter. When dispatch calls for the helicopter, they're going to tell them all of these things. Okay. The only thing that we may have to tell them is the landing zone. And if you call for a helicopter frequently, then you're going to have designated landing zones. And those designated landing zones, your dispatch should already have the GPS coordinates for those so that they can tell the helicopter where to go exactly. So in our area, we don't necessarily set up a landing zone on the ambulance. The fire department does it. But it's good to know just in case you have to set up a landing zone by yourself. So you want to make sure that you have good terrain, note any major landmarks, and your estimated distance to the nearest town, and any other pertinent information such as wires, ditches, or wind. Okay, your helicopter landing zone is 100 by 100 foot, and you want to make sure that they know which areas that they need to be aware of around that 100 by 100 foot area. Okay, so the area around the tail rotor is most extremely dangerous. The spinning rotor cannot be seen. So when you approach the helicopter, you always approach towards the side, towards the front area-ish, where the pilot can see you. So do not approach unless escorted by flight personnel. Allow the crew to direct loading of the patient. Stay clear of the tail rotor at all times. Keep all traffic and vehicles at least 100 feet from the helicopter. Do not smoke near the aircraft and be aware of any danger areas. All right, so chapter review. We want to inspect the vehicle to assure that it is complete and that critical items can be easily located. A hot response means using licensed siren. Hot responses involve high risk. A cold response means no licensed sirens. Cold responses decrease risk. The laws in most states allow the driver of an emergency vehicle running hot to break some of the vehicle and traffic laws. However, it must be done with due regard for the safety of others. Pay attention to driving. Do not text, make phone calls, drink beverages, or be in any way distracted while driving. Secure all gear. It can become a projectile in a crash. My particular service requires that everything in the back of the truck be strapped down so that it is not a projectile. Do not let your patient become a projectile. Use the stretcher shoulder straps. Again, not all services use them. Most services are, and it's becoming commonplace to use those shoulder straps or harnesses on the cot. Wear your seatbelt in front and back whenever possible. Know the medical and operational reasons for helicopter transport and know how to set up a safe landing zone. Okay, so that 100 by 100 area, and then reasons to call for a helicopter. Okay, so remember things to remember. So ambulances must be properly stocked and prepared. Pre-call inspections assure readiness and appropriate equipment. EMDs enhance the patient care by providing pre-arrival instructions and by obtaining information for responders. Each state has statutes regulating operation of emergency vehicles. EMTs must be familiar with local rules and regulations. They have to be use good judgment and due regard for the safety of others. Okay. The 4 steps in transferring the patient to the ambulance are selecting the proper patient carrying device, packaging the patient, moving the patient to the ambulance, and loading the patient into the ambulance. Patients should be safely secured prior to the ambulance's moving. Assessment and care must continue during transport. The primary concern of transfer care is continuation of patient care. So failure to do so properly can be considered abandonment. And then cleaning the ambulance, replacing used supplies and equipment, readying the ambulance stretcher are important elements of how the EMT must complete when terminating the call. So indications for utilizing the air ambulance can include both operation and medical reasons. Be familiar with how you do that and how you call for that ambulance. Okay, so again, these are questions to consider. These are things that I just want you to think about. I'm not going to go through them. Just think about them as you read your book and go through all of that. So does the patient have a true emergency adversely affected by time? How can I park to best protect the scene and personnel? Does my personal protective equipment match what is being worn by others? So what equipment should you include in a carry kit that you carry to the scene? How should the equipment be positioned so that you can reach urgently needed items quickly? And what special items, if any, should be in the kit to meet local needs? So this is the end of Chapter 36, Operations, for the EMT. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can email me, text me, call me, and I will get to those.